please turn in your Bibles to the book of 2 Chronicles. The book of Chronicles have the writers selected very few accounts, selected accounts of certain kings to be included, something that was to be passed on for generations to come. First Chronicle talks primarily about King David. And 2 Chronicles, the first 9 chapters, talk about Solomon. And the last verse of 9th chapter says, and when Solomon died, he was buried with his fathers, and his son takes over, and life goes on. But before talking about his death, the writer wants to highlight one event from Solomon's life before he talks about his closing his story. Now, this event happened much earlier in Solomon's life, but it is the highlight of Solomon's life before you talk about his death. Let's look at this story. 2 Chronicles chapter 9, verse 1 onward. It says, when the Queen of Sheba heard of Solomon's fame, she came to Jerusalem to test him with hard questions. Let's stop right there for a minute. It says, when the Queen of Sheba heard of Solomon's fame. Now, Queen has been associated with the area called Sheba, which is found in southern Ethiopia, a long way from Jerusalem, almost 2,000 miles. So far away, it says that she heard of Solomon's fame. By definition, the word fame means that something has to be famous consistently for a long period of time before it's called famous. So far away, she hears about Solomon. Just transpired what must have transpired. Just imagine it a little bit with me. That so far away, one day the queen comes out of her palace all dressed up nicely. Someone gives her a compliment. Oh, that's a wonderful dress you're wearing. And then it says, by the way, do you know that Solomon wears the finest silk that comes from around the world? And she says, who's Solomon? He says, well, remember King David? Oh, yes, we all know King David. Well, his son Solomon has taken over now. And he brings the silk from all around the world. Few more days passed by. It was Queen's birthday. They had a beautiful party. A lot of guests came, a lot of food, a lot of fun. As someone is leaving, makes a comment, oh, thank you, Queen, for the party. It was wonderful. But you know what? One of these days, you've got to get yourself invited to Solomon's party. He imports food from around the world. That's the best place to go. And she says, well, I've heard the name Solomon. Who's he? Remind me again. Remember King David? Oh, yes, we all know King David. Well, his son Solomon has taken over. And he's the one I've been talking about. A few more months passed by. This time it was the big parade for the king's kingdom to celebrate the anniversary. They displayed a lot of beautiful stuff. And as someone was leaving, made a comment, they said, oh, wonderful to know that how many horses and fighting men we have. But do you know how many horses Solomon has? Or the size of his elephants? She said, no, remind me again, who's Solomon? Or remember King David? In other words, whichever way she turns, somebody or the other is talking about Solomon. To the point that she probably got sick and tired of hearing about this man. And she thinks that how could so much of goodness exist in one man? So she gets a bright idea. She calls her officials and says, guess what? I want to make a trip to Jerusalem to find out what I've heard about Solomon is really true or not. And the officials must have said, Queen, you must be crazy. That's 2,000 miles away. It doesn't matter how fast you go. The back of the horse on a donkey is going to take us 3 or 4 months just to get there. And then remember, you have to come back also. And the number of kingdoms that we are friends with, some kingdoms we are enemies, we are not really friendly with them, so we have to take permissions for you to travel through all that to go all the way up there. It's not worth it. You commission 2 men, we'll go there. When we come back, we'll give you a 100-stone tablet report so you can read all about it. And she says, no. I want to go and find out what I've heard about this man is really true or not. So it was not an easy thing for this queen to just pick up and drive to talk to Solomon. She must have prepared for a long time. It was a very expensive trip. She had to give up convenience. go over there for a long period of time. And the text says that she had this huge caravan with her, and she's carrying all kinds of stuff with her. Now, she's coming to Jerusalem with two things in mind. First, she's coming to prove that this Solomon could not be what people claim him to be. So that's why it says that she's coming to Jerusalem to test Solomon with hard questions. So she's prepared to discredit him. But then she's also thinking that in case this man turns out to be what people claim him to be, a great king, then you don't visit a great king and not bring any gift for him. So she comes prepared with a huge amount of gifts that she's going to give to Solomon. I'm sure riding back at the back of the donkey for 3 months, she must have come up with a very hard question to ask. She must be thinking, I'm going to get this guy. Why in the world am I taking this journey? She arrives. And the text says that she talked to Solomon about all that was on her mind. And verse 2 says, Solomon answered all her questions. Nothing was too hard for him to explain to her. And verse 3, when the Queen of Sheba saw the wisdom of Solomon, as well as the palace he had built, the food on his table, the seating of his officials, the attending servants in their robes, the cupbearers in their robes, and the burnt offerings he made at the temple of the Lord, she was overwhelmed. She is checking him thoroughly, every little detail. You know, when I was growing up, I found out that both my grandparents were very, very wealthy. They were two of the richest people in town that we were growing up. My grandfather was a horse trader. He used to train horses, sell them to the British Army. Then he became a moneylender and lots of other businesses. So had a lot of rich heritage. On the other hand, my mom's side of the family, they also ran a very sophisticated businesses for a long time and were very wealthy. But oftentimes, my mom used to make comments. She says, you know, your dad's side of the family, they probably have a lot more money than my side of the family. But it doesn't matter how much money they have, at the end of the day, they still smell like horses. In other words, she says that they don't have a class. They don't have any this thing. And it's true. If you ever got invited to my dad's side of the family, you could do whatever you want to do. You can eat with your hands, with your feet, and do whatever you want, take home. Just enjoy yourself. But if you ever got invited to my mom's side of the family, you may not even get to eat enough because there's a proper way of eating for everything, and you may come home hungry. Because they were just so picky in the way they did things. And my mom was the kind of person she was never ever impressed by flashy, fresh money. She often used to say that if you want to see how wealthy somebody is, look at how they treat their servants. And in Indian context, that's a very common thing. That's what this queen is doing. She's checking the food, where it's come from. She knows that this fruit could not be from here. She's looking at not how Solomon is dressed up, but how the servants and the cupbearers are dressed up. Basically, she's checking him for 3 things. Of course, she came to check him for his wisdom, and she was satisfied with the questions that she asked and different things she had. She's also checking him out for his richness. How rich is this guy? But then third thing, she's checking him for his royalty. She said, I'm not impressed with just money because I also have money back there. Does this guy know how to be a king, how to be a royal? And that's why the mannerism of doing things and how he did that. And after the whole thing is done, the text says she's overwhelmed. You know what overwhelmed is? Let me explain to you. A number of years ago, my wife and I got a chance to make a trip from Dallas to California, a road trip. And we were going to stop by, look at different people, and visit different cities and come back. Someone suggested, you know what, on your way back, you could easily make a little bit of detour and go and see Grand Canyon. Has anybody seen Grand Canyon here? Okay, a number of you, you'll understand what I'm saying. And I said, what is this Grand Canyon? They tried to explain to me and everything, and I looked at the map and the days. I said, you know what, I don't have time to see this hole on the ground. And it's really going to throw us off. And they said, no, it's a once in a lifetime, go there, and it's an experience. Not everybody get to see that, go there. Okay, so we drive, half-heartedly I go there, and I had this 35mm camera, the tiny one. So we drive up there, I come to the edge of the Grand Canyon. And if you've been there, you know what I'm talking about. And you look down, you look wide, you look to the side, you look this way, and in one breath, in one sight of your eye, you cannot capture it. You have to go like this, like this. And then I had this 35 camera, and I said, what exactly am I clicking? When you look at that, suddenly your jaw drops, and you say, wow. Because it's an overwhelming experience. You never expect something to be so big and so grand. And that's the experience that this queen had after going through the whole experience with Solomon. Her jaw drops and she says, wow. And then listen to what she says in the following verses. She said to the king in verse 5, the report I heard in my own country about your achievements and your wisdom is true. But I did not believe until I came here and saw with my own eyes. And then she has this little complaint. She says, indeed, not even half of your greatness was told me. In other words, she says that every bump at the back of the horse was worth it. Every bad meal, every upset stomach, every loss of sleep, all the hardship, all the money that I spent, all the comfort that I gave up, it was worth it to come and see and talk to you in person. And I'm so glad I did it because I wouldn't have found the full story, how great you are. And then she starts praising him and Solomon's God. She said, how wonderful it must be for people to be working for you. How wonderful for God to have entrusted you this responsibility and to serve him, serve his people. And later on the text tells us that Solomon blessed her with bigger gifts, more gifts. So she went back home more blessed than what she was trying to bless Solomon with.